Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to, unpack complex stuff and make it actually useful for you. Today, we are continuing our journey through the MPEP, the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, basically helping you get a handle on it.
Exactly. And in each deep dive, we grab one specific section, break it down, give some examples. The idea is really to make this dense manual a bit more accessible, whether you're hitting the books for the patent bar or just trying to figure out how U.S. patent law works.
Right. And today, we're hitting a really fundamental piece, especially for older patent cases. We're diving into Chapter 2100, patentability, and specifically Section 2132.
Yes, Section 2132 that covers Pre-AIA 35 U.S.C. 102A.
Yeah.
This section is all about the rules for getting a patent concerning novelty. Is your invention actually new? And how you might lose the right to patent it. Now, the big thing to remember here, this only applies to applications looked at under the old first to invent rules, before the AIA, the American Invents Act.
Okay, super important distinction. So pre-AIA rules only. For those applications, what's the core idea behind this 102A?
Well, the gist is, you couldn't get a patent back then if your invention was already known or used by others in this country, or if it was patented or described in a printed publication before you actually came up with the invention yourself. Those are the two main conditions, the two hurdles we're going to look at. Let's start with the first one. Known or used by others in this country. What does that actually entail?
Okay. Known or used by others in this country. Yeah, my first question is, how public does that have to be? Like, does everyone need to know?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The key word is public accessibility. For something to count as prior art under this known or used clause, the public needed to have some reasonable way to access that knowledge or see that use before the inventor's date. It kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah.
The whole point of patents is to encourage inventors to share new things publicly. You wouldn't grant a patent for something that was already sort of out there.
Right, okay. So let's take an example. Say a company has this amazing manufacturing process, but they keep it totally secret inside their factory. Does that count as known or used if they sell the products made by it?
Generally, no. That's a good example, actually.
Oh.
The MPP mentions secret manufacturing processes. Even if the products hit the market, the secret process itself isn't considered public use unless you could, take the product apart and figure out the process, reverse engineer it. The core idea is whether the public could have learned about it. If it's genuinely secret, it usually doesn't stop someone else from patenting their own independent invention later.
Okay, that clarifies the public aspect. Now, what about the in this country part? Is that strictly geographical?
Oh, absolutely. For pre-AIA 102A in this country means exactly that, within the United States. So knowledge or use had to happen within the U.S. borders to count as prior art under this specific clause. If something was widely known or used, say, in Germany, but not here, doesn't count for this part. But, and this is important, foreign stuff can matter under the second part of 102A, the patented or described bit. We'll get there.
Got it. U.S. only for known or used. Now, who are these others? Does it just mean, completely separate people or companies?
By others. It's actually interpreted pretty broadly. It basically means any inventive entity, the group of listed inventors that's different in any way from the inventors listed on the application being examined.
Wait, hold on. So even if there's just one inventor different between the prior art disclosure and the current application?
Exactly that. Just one different name on the list is enough to make that prior disclosure by others relative to the application. It sounds subtle, maybe, but it's got big consequences.
Wow, okay. Why such a broad definition?
It's mainly about protecting the one-year grace period that existed under pre-AIA 102B. See, inventors had a year after certain public disclosures of their own work to file a patent. If by others meant something much narrower, you could imagine scenarios where people might try to game the system, maybe making a disclosure with a slightly tweaked inventor list just outside that one-year window. This broad definition helps keep the focus on who really invented it first.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. It prevents some potential workarounds. Let's shift to the second condition then. Patented or described in a printed publication. How's this different from the known or used part?
The biggest difference, like we hinted at, is geography, or rather the lack of it. For patents or printed publications, it doesn't matter where in the world they originated. A patent granted in Japan, or a technical journal published in France, or anywhere else if it was available before the U.S. inventor's date of invention, it could be prior art under this part of 102A. So known or used is U.S. bound, but patented or described is global.
Okay, global reach for patents and publications. Makes sense. But what level of detail is needed in that patent or publication? Can it just, like, mention the invention briefly?
No, definitely not. A passing mention isn't enough. The MPP points to Section 2121.01 here. It stresses that the prior art reference needs to provide an enabling disclosure.
Enabling disclosure. What does that mean exactly?
It means the description has to be detailed enough that someone who's skilled in that particular technology, what we call a person of ordinary skill in the art, could actually make and use the invention based on that description without needing excessive or undue experimentation. Think of it like a recipe. The prior art needs to give you enough instructions to actually bake the cake, not just mention that a cake exists.
Right. So just naming it or giving a very vague description, that probably won't cut it?
Precisely. There's a case in Rihoksima, mentioned in the MP, that made this point. Merely naming something isn't enough if the skilled person can't actually produce it from that info. And another case, Ilin Pharmaceuticals, reinforces that the prior art has to actually empower someone to make the invention. It can't require unreasonable guesswork or trial and error.
Okay, enabling disclosure, got it. That's the standard. So it's about whether the public was effectively put in possession of the invention by that publication.
That's a great way to put it. Referencing Henry Donahue, the MPE basically says, yeah, the public is considered in possession if someone skilled in the field could take that publication, combine it with their existing knowledge, and actually practice the invention. It's about whether that disclosure truly made the invention available to those in the know.
Makes total sense. It's the combination of the document and existing skill. Okay, so let's say an examiner issues a rejection under Pre-AIA 102A, citing some prior art. What can the applicant do? What are the options?
Well, there are a couple of main paths. First, the applicant can argue. They could argue that their claimed invention is actually different from what the examiner found in the prior art. Maybe point out specific features in their claims that just aren't in that reference. Or they might amend the claims to make those differences clearer.
So basically saying, hey, look closer, my invention isn't the same as that reference.
Exactly. The other major route involves filing specific legal documents, affidavits, or declarations. These fall under Rules 37 CFR 1.131 and 1.132. They're formal ways to present evidence to the examiner.
Okay, 1.131 and 1.132 affidavits. Let's take 1.131 first. Now, what's its purpose in fighting a 102A rejection?
A 1.131 affidavit is often called an affidavit of prior invention. You use it to show evidence that you, the applicant, actually invented the claimed subject matter before the effective date of that prior art reference the examiner cited. It's about proving you were first.
There's a nuance, though.
Yeah, if the applicant's filing date, their constructive reduction to practice, is later than the effective date of the reference, sometimes a 1.131 isn't enough. According to the rules, specifically 37 CFR 41.202D1 and MPPP Section 2305, they might need to prove priority in a more formal interference proceeding instead. But the basic idea of 1.131 is showing earlier invention.
Okay, proving you invented earlier. What about the 1.132 affidavit then? What's that for?
A 1.132 affidavit is different. It's used to show that the disclosure in the cited reference actually originated from the applicant's own work. Essentially, the applicant is arguing that reference isn't really by others because the information ultimately came from me or my team. It might have been published by someone else, maybe a collaborator or student, but it traces back to the applicant's invention.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're basically saying the prior art isn't independent. Can you give an example?
Sure. The MPP uses the case. Remember Katz here. In Katz's, the applicant filed a declaration similar to an affidavit, showing that the co-authors listed on a publication cited against them were actually students working under the inventor's direct supervision. This evidence helps show that the publication wasn't truly independent work by others, but rather stemmed from the inventor's own contributions, just disseminated through the students. That connection allowed the rejection to be overcome. It showed the source wasn't really other in the sense the law intended.
That's a fantastic illustration. It really highlights the nuance in by others.
Absolutely. So the big picture for Pre-AIA 102A is it sets these clear boundaries based on what was known or published before the invention date. Understanding known or used by others in this country, patented or described, needing and enabling disclosure of the scope of by others, and how to use things like 1.131 and 1.132 affidavits, all critical for navigating these older applications.
Definitely. This has been incredibly helpful in clarifying Pre-AIA 102A. We've hit the key terms, the geographical limits, enabling disclosures, the meaning of others, and how to respond to rejections.
Glad it was helpful. And just to reiterate for everyone listening, This is meant as a study aid, a general resource.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is not legal advice. For definitive answers, always go to the official MPEP source, talk to a qualified instructor, or consult with a registered patent attorney or agent.
Sad advice.
We also want to make sure to thank Mike Shepard. He's the creative director who really organized and guided the production of this whole educational series. We couldn't have done it without his vision and leadership.
Hear, hear. And now, the necessary disclaimer. This summary of the MPEP was generated using AI tools, including ChatGPT and Notebook LM. It might contain errors or omissions. It's provided for general educational and informational purposes only. It is definitely not legal advice or a substitute for formal instruction. For authoritative guidance, please consult the official MPEP, a qualified instructor, or a registered patent practitioner.
Okay, and before we wrap up, something to chew on. We just spent all this time on the pre-AIA first to invent system under 102A. Now we live under the AIA's first inventor to file system. How do you think that fundamental shift has changed the game for inventors and companies trying to protect their ideas? What strategies are different now when thinking about novelty and prior art? It's a really big change to consider.